In early 2015, I just finished collaborating with Alex Honnold on his memoir, Alone on the Wall, which would be published the next year and which, no, would be published that fall actually, and eventually would lead to the free solo movie that's now wowing everybody. So I was trying to think about my next book, and I had various ideas, and then suddenly in June 2015, I was diagnosed with stage 4 throat cancer, and immediately had to go into radiation and chemotherapy treatment that lasted for months into November. Um, it was pretty brutal treatment. I nearly died a couple of times, and the very thought of trying to write anything was way beyond me. I actually considered that I might never write another book. I considered I might not live more than a couple more weeks or months. But by January 2016, I was feeling slightly better, and I started to think about a book I might be able to write without really traveling much, without going far from home. So I decided to write a meditation on adventure, what adventure had meant to me, what adventure had meant to some of the great explorers of the past and mountain climbers. And it's something I've been thinking about all my life, but I really wanted to put it all in one place, in one book. And that's sort of the germ of the idea of Limits of the Known. In that book, various chapters explore some of the, or rather recapitulate, some of the great deeds that I most admired, like Fridtjof Nansen's Farthest North and Eric Shipton's amazing 1937 reconnaissance of the Karakoram. And I also weave in my own adventures on a much more modest scale. But I end the book with uh, uh, a summoning up of my memories of the only trip I had ever done, only with my wife, Sharon, which was a trip to a pair of lakes in western Alaska in 1970 when we were in our middle 20s, just recently married, in which we spent 18 days paddling a Klepper foal boat or collapsible kayak the length of two gigantic lakes and saw nobody during the whole trip. So Sharon had been my savior through 2 years of cancer treatment and continues to be my savior today. So I wanted to end the trip with an evocation, end my book with an evocation of that trip as I looked back on it from, what, 46 years of memory. So I'm going to read a passage that actually is the closing passage of the book. I had hoped that the weather and the tick-chicks would partake of the benign pattern that obtained in the Brooks Range. But alas, the storms we waited out were all too reminiscent of the gales and blizzards of the Alaska Range. A week into our trip, we were marooned by 3 days of wind and nonstop rain, a few degrees above freezing. We lay in our double sleeping bag, reading the few books we had brought as slowly as we could, scrounging for topics for conversation. The driftwood branches scattered along the lake shore were so thoroughly soaked we couldn't keep a campfire going. I had gone into our trip expecting a relaxing lark in a landscape much tamer than the glacial immensities of Denali and Deborah. But now I was awed by the raw grandeur of our surroundings. It's a wild, often gloomy place, I confessed to my diary on July 9th, and the two of us seemed very alone in it. And on July 15, I can't rid myself of the sense of size and emptiness and Alaska-ness of the place. Day by day, we grew accustomed to the strangeness of our wilderness, and by midway through our 67-mile journey, we found whole hours of tranquil delight to counterbalance the gloom. Birds were everywhere, flocks of ducks and geese skittering along the lake's surface, hawks and eagles soaring high above us as they rode thermals, the plaintive cries of gulls and terns and loons wafting from dark cliffs we floated past. On calm days, the lake turned into a glassy mirror, reflecting the distant hillsides in inverted duplicate images. When the sun came out, we threw off our jackets and paddled in t-shirts. Each morning as we climbed into the klepper, we clasped hands, and Sharon leaned back from her front seat to give me a good luck kiss. During the first days, our arms had ached from paddling, but now we were fit, and our swiveling strokes blended in a thoughtless choreography. Since we had seen no bears during the first 12 days, Sharon began to relax. On July 17th, we neared the western end of Lake Noyakuk, 5 days ahead of our scheduled float plane pickup. A pair of coves called Portage Arm and Mirror Bay nestled beneath the nameless peaks beyond. We could spend the remaining time leisurely exploring those sheltered mini-lakes. I had lost my peat bagging ambitions. Instead, I was content to poke among the miniature surprises that lay nearer at hand. And then we found the perfect campsite. Half a mile inside Portage Arm, we came upon a small island just offshore. We pulled the klepper out of the water to check the place out. Only a few yards back, we found a clearing in the bushes, swathed in a lush carpet of tundra. We pitched our tent there and sprawled inside. The tundra beneath the floor felt like a limitless mattress of down. Just outside the tent, instead of a sandy shore, a geologic quirk called greenstone pillows shelved into the water, sensuously curved like waves caught in mid-splash. Not far away, we found enough dry alder and willow branches for a week's worth of campfires. We spent our last 5 days on the island. Because we were separated from the coast of Portage Arm, Sharon felt completely safe for the first time during the whole expedition. Bears could swim, of course, but why would they bother? On the warmest day of all, we took off our clothes and basked on the greenstone pillows. Then we tiptoed over to the tundra cushion beside the tent, where we made love, our skin bare to the sky and sun, our souls in harmony with our temporary universe and with each other. I reread my Tick-Chick diary recently. It left me disappointed. All the talk of miles paddled, of topography unraveled, of rations and weather and schedules calibrated. Why had I not paused for a single day to reflect, to try to place our 18-day trip in context? By the end, it became the idyll I had hoped it would be. Why did I not try to weigh just how that brief escape from our normal lives fit into the uncertain journey Sharon and I had pledged to make through life together? Every couple that weathers the vicissitudes of a life together, that resists the temptation to chuck it in and start over, must confront the prospect of a last act to the play that fate weaves around its long trajectory. Barring a catastrophic accident, a car crash, a house burning down, an avalanche scouring the face of a mountain, one partner will in all likelihood die before the other. It is a denouement impossible to prepare for. I saw it happen to my mother, who lived on for 17 years after my father died in 1990. Throughout the decades of our marriage, Sharon and I never really talked about the scenario that seemed to lie so far in the future. But during the last year and a half, we have not been able to keep it far from our minds for very long. Still, we have scarcely discussed it, as if keeping our fears unarticulated might push the event further into the fog of the future. Given, however, all the depredations that cancer has wreaked upon my body, and given the normal course of metastasis, I'm pretty certain that I will die before she does. Illness drastically narrows one's imaginative scope. During the depths of my worst tribulations, when I lay in a hospital bed clinging to life, I could barely think beyond the pain and confusion. The world outside me shrank and dimmed. All I cared about was taking the next breath. Though death might be happening to me, it seemed an abstract matter, a pity, no doubt, and a nuisance, but not a turn of events over which I had much control. During the last several months of even keel since my last medical crisis, however, I have turned my thoughts toward ultimate things. Yet it seems hard to reach beyond the threads of fantasy that float through my mind. As human beings, perhaps uniquely among the creatures on earth, we know that we are going to die. In an ideal world, we would claim the privilege of writing the script that trails toward the final page. Instead, thanks to doctors and hospitals and the desperate hope for another chance, the end usually arrives as an insensate spiral into coma, or in the smother of morphine dulling the sharp edge of pain. We are left all but powerless to orchestrate our last moments among the living. For one who does not believe in God, prayer is a waste of time. In its place, I have only hope or wish. What I wish for then, in that last conscious moment before the darkness closes in forever, is not the shining memory of some summit underfoot that I was the first to reach, not the gleam of yet another undiscovered land on the horizon, but the touch of Sharon's fingers as she clasped my hand in hers, unwilling to let go.